I never thought the word now could be so flexible until I arrived in Manila. I had been living in the US for years, where now is immediate, non-negotiable, urgent, a word that practically comes with a ticking timer. But here, in the Philippines, now seemed to float in the air, suspended somewhere between immediately and whenever the universe decides. It was like stepping into a parallel dimension where time had a sense of humor. It all started when my friend Liza invited me to her cousin's birthday party. She said, "Hey, we'll meet at the mall now." I had visions of sprinting through the traffic, of dodging jeepneys and motorbikes, calculating every possible shortcut. I left my apartment 20 minutes early, feeling proud of my punctuality. When I arrived, the party had yet to start. Liza appeared 30 minutes later, completely unbothered, holding a halo and waving casually. "I'm here now," she said, smiling like she'd been on time all along. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the now she proclaimed with the glaring reality that her now had somehow expanded into a 30-minute grace period. And then it clicked. Now in the Philippines isn't a time. It's a suggestion, an invitation, a spiritual concept. It's more of a vibe than a timestamp. That evening, I went to a small cafe near my Airbnb. The barista said, "Your coffee will be ready now." I took a sip of my water, scrolling through Instagram, fully expecting the next 10 minutes to pass without notice. 30 minutes later, my coffee appeared, still warm, and I realized that now had passed in its own mysterious Filipino way. I laughed, trying to remember what it was like to be in a place where now was strictly literal. The next day, I met my language tutor, Aling Nina, at a public library to practice Tagalog. She texted me, "Be there now." I arrived 20 minutes early because old habits die hard. Aling Nina arrived 45 minutes later, humming a tune, waving cheerfully, and saying, "Sorry, I was stuck in traffic now." I wanted to say something, anything, but her serene smile disarmed me. Time was her ally, not mine. I began asking locals about this strange flexibility with time. At first, I thought it was laziness, but no, it was deeper than that. It was culturally ingrained patience, a collective understanding that schedules are guidelines, not chains. A jeepney driver explained it to me once while I was trying to get to the airport. Here, we say now, but now is elastic. You stretch it according to the mood, the traffic, and the weather. If you're too strict, you break your spirit. I laughed, trying to imagine this in New York. Can you imagine a cab driver saying, "I'll get you to JFK now," or "in the next hour," whichever feels right? Americans would lose their minds. This elasticity of now came in handy in the small things. My neighbor, Mang Tonyo, said he'd help me carry my groceries up to my apartment now. I waited 30 minutes while he sipped coffee and watched a stray cat chase pigeons. When he finally appeared, he apologized. I was finishing now." I realized a finishing now was another concept entirely. It meant whatever moment the universe deemed appropriate. I decided to test the concept in social experiments. I texted different friends, "I'll be there now." Responses were enlightening. One friend arrived 10 minutes later, another 30, and one arrived at the now the next day. It was inconsistent, unpredictable, yet somehow always socially acceptable. In the US, this would spark lawsuits. Here, it sparked laughter. At first, I was frustrated. My internal clock was set to precision, to deadlines, to appointments. Every Filipino now felt like a little rebellion against my orderly mind. But slowly, I started enjoying it. Waiting 30 minutes for Liza to show up gave me time to people watch, to observe the street vendors juggling their carts, to see children playing hopscotch in puddles from last night's rain. Now allowed me to notice life, not just schedule it. Even public transportation followed the now philosophy. Jeepneys and tricycles arrive now, leave now, and sometimes they leave later. Buses advertise departure times with a straight face, yet now could mean any moment in the next hour. On my way to Intramuros, I waited for a bus that said it would arrive now. 45 minutes later, it rolled in, horns blaring and passengers smiling as if the wait was a shared joke. I joined in the laughter, realizing that now was not a failure. It was a communal understanding that life cannot be rushed. My experience with restaurants was equally enlightening. I ordered lunch at a popular carinderia. The sign said, "Open now." I entered and waited 15 minutes before anyone acknowledged me. The woman behind the counter smiled and said, "Yes. Now, what will you have?" I understood that the establishment was technically open, but the human element, the mood, the rice cooker finishing its cycle, dictated the true now. Over the week, I noticed patterns. Now was not just a time marker. It was a polite buffer. If a friend said, "I'll meet you now," it meant, "I will meet you at a time convenient to both of us, preferably soonish, but don't stress." Now could stretch for traffic, weather, or even nap schedules. I realized this elasticity extended to all Filipino communication. Later often meant maybe soon, and maybe usually meant definitely yes if convenient. The concept reached its peak hilarity during my visit to a barangay hall. I was signing paperwork for my temporary visa extension. The clerk told me my application would be ready now. I returned an hour later, then two, then finally on the third attempt, the officer smiled and handed me my approved documents. "Ah, now," he said. I laughed, thinking of the thousands of emails I would have fired off in New York demanding status updates. Here, patience was not just a virtue, it was a survival tactic. Even shopping experiences reinforced the flexible nature of now. In Divisoria, I asked a vendor if an item was in stock. "Yes, now," he said, pointing behind a pile of plastic baskets. I waited 10 minutes while he haggled with another customer. "Now," he said again, finally bringing the product. I realized that now could encompass negotiation, social interaction, and lunch breaks. Everything that made time human rather than mechanical. By the end of my first week, I had adapted. I began using now myself. I told Liza, "I'll come to your house now," fully aware that now could stretch for 20, 30, or 45 minutes. She smiled knowingly and said, "Yes, now." And somehow, the world kept spinning. The tricycle drivers, the neighbors, the children playing in puddles, they all seemed to exist in a collective, harmonious now, untethered from clocks. On my last day in Manila for that first week, I met a group of young professionals at a cafe. We discussed work schedules, appointments, and deadlines. I asked, "How do you handle meetings?" They laughed. "Oh, we say now, and we mean it spiritually. The meeting happens when everyone is ready. Not before, not after, but now." I nodded solemnly, suddenly understanding that I had been resisting a cultural philosophy far older than punctuality. Now was not about time. It was about presence. I walked home that evening through the warm streets, neon signs flickering, jeepneys honking, children running barefoot through the drizzle. I thought of the American concept of on time, of the constant rush, of calendars and clocks. And then I smiled, thinking of Liza saying, "I'm here now," 30 minutes late. Maybe I was starting to get it. Now was freedom. Now was patience. Now was laughter waiting at the other end of a 20-minute delay. As I sipped my halo from a street vendor, I whispered to myself, "Filipino now. I think I understand you." I didn't just understand it intellectually, I felt it. It was a rhythm of life, a gentle reminder that sometimes waiting was the point, that time stretched not to punish, but to allow experiences, smiles, and stories to exist. And somewhere in the distance, Liza called, "I'm here now." I smiled, waved, and decided to be exactly 30 minutes late to meet her, fully, gloriously in tune with Filipino now. After a week of living under the gentle tyranny of Filipino now, I began to notice it everywhere, in traffic, in markets, even in casual greetings. One morning, I decided to meet Liza at a coffee shop downtown. She had texted, "See you now." Naturally, I arrived early. I had fully internalized that now in the Philippines was a soft guideline, a suggestion, not a promise. I found a table near the window and watched the street unfold like a living, breathing movie. Jeepneys honked, tricycles weaved around pedestrians, and street vendors shouted their daily specials. Then Liza arrived 30 minutes later, carrying a backpack and a smoothie. She waved and said, "I'm here now." I laughed. 30 minutes late was now standard. and I was slowly letting go of my obsession with precise schedules. On that same morning, I took a ride with a tricycle driver, Mang Jun. I asked him how long it would take to get to the train station. "Now, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 40, he said with a grin. I laughed nervously. He had no meter, no stopwatch, no timeline, only intuition, a sense of rhythm, and an ability to navigate chaotic traffic with the patience of a Zen monk. Halfway there, we stopped for coffee at a roadside stall. "Now is good," Mang Jun said, sipping his espresso. "Life is too short to rush." I realized he wasn't just joking. This was a life philosophy. Filipino now was especially entertaining in the marketplace. I wandered through Divisoria, looking for souvenirs, when a vendor called out, "Ma'am, I'll get the item now." I waited 20 minutes as he sorted through piles of plastic baskets, haggling over prices, chatting with a neighbor, and taking a selfie for his Facebook page. Eventually, he returned, holding my item proudly. I wanted to scold him, but the absurd charm of it won me over. I paid, thanked him, and realized that now could stretch to cover small human interactions, spontaneous laughter, and community bonding. Later that week, I attended a fiesta in a nearby barangay. The invitation had said, "Starts now, everyone welcome." I arrived on time, or so I thought. The celebration was still being set up. Tables were half covered with cloths, bands were tuning instruments, and children were decorating the stage with papel de hapon streamers. Now had stretched into a full setup period, and no one seemed stressed about it. The people laughed, shared snacks, and danced while preparing. Now, in the Philippines, clearly had a festive, relaxed rhythm all its own. At the fiesta, I met Tito Manny, a man known for being notoriously late. I asked him, "Tito, when do you usually arrive?" He laughed, clapped me on the shoulder, and said, "Now, but you know, now is flexible. You never know what now really means." I realized he wasn't being evasive. He was imparting a cultural lesson in patience. I watched as he mingled, joked, and helped set up decorations, proving that the universe had a way of filling now with meaningful moments. Even in government offices, now had a mystique of its own. I went to the local barangay hall to renew my tourist permit. The sign said, "Processing now." I sat in the waiting area, surrounded by locals who were also experiencing their own version of now. 2 hours later, the clerk called me over, smiling and saying, "Now, your documents are ready." I laughed, realizing that patience wasn't just a virtue in the Philippines, it was survival. Transportation was another masterclass in now. On one rainy afternoon, I hailed a jeepney to take me to Intramuros. The driver yelled, "Board now!" I squeezed in, and we waited 5 minutes as passengers finished chatting. Someone bought street snacks and a child ran in circles outside. Now here meant, board when everyone is ready, but don't rush. Halfway through the ride, we stopped at a corner where a vendor was selling manggang hilaw with bagong. The jeepney didn't leave until half the passengers bought snacks. Now had become an experiential pause, a collective breathing moment in traffic chaos. The concept extended to the smallest social gestures. I invited a few friends over for dinner. I texted, "I'll cook now." 30 minutes later, everyone arrived with ingredients in hand, apologizing for their delay, yet laughing and chatting as if it were completely normal. My kitchen became a blend of smells, stories, and jokes, and suddenly I didn't mind that now had stretched into the next hour. Dinner was more enjoyable than I could have planned. Even ordering food in a small carinderia revealed the now philosophy. I asked for sinigang na baboy. The cook said, "It will be ready now." I watched him wash vegetables, boil water, chat with customers, and flip pancit on another stove. Finally, 20 minutes later, the soup was served. I realized the process was more important than the deadline, the human interaction, the conversation, the laughter, everything that made waiting worthwhile. One evening, I joined a karaoke session with some locals. A friend shouted, "Sing now!" I was ready, microphone in hand. Everyone waited 10 minutes as the host set up the songs, adjusted the speakers, and argued with the DJ about the playlist. Finally, when I sang, they cheered and clapped. Now had allowed preparation, anticipation, and dramatic flair. I laughed, realizing my Western impatience had robbed me of this nuanced joy. At the end of the week, I sat on a jeepney, reflecting on my experiences. The sunset painted the city in shades of orange and pink. Children played in the puddles of last night's rain. Street vendors called out in rhythmic chants, offering fruits and snacks. And I thought of all the nows I had experienced. The waiting, the smiling, the laughter, the flexibility. I realized that now was not just a word. It was a cultural art form, a philosophy that balanced patience, humor, and community. Back at my Airbnb, I called Liza to meet me for dinner. "I'll be there now," she texted. I smiled, knowing she would arrive when the universe deemed appropriate. And as I waited, I understood the lesson deeply. In the Philippines, now is not about time. It is about presence, about engagement, about living fully in the moment and laughing while you wait. By the third week, I was fully immersed in the Filipino concept of now. I had stopped glancing at my watch every 5 minutes. I had learned to embrace the unpredictability of arrival times, meal times, even traffic. Now had become a gentle, omnipresent force that colored every interaction, and I couldn't help but laugh at its absurd charm. The first extreme test came during a wedding. Liza had invited me to her cousin's nuptials. The invitation had said, "Ceremony starts now." I arrived at the church 30 minutes early, hoping to snag a good seat. The church was empty, save for a couple of decorators fussing over flowers and ribbons. I shrugged and wandered outside, watching children chase each other around the churchyard. Birds perched on the crosses, chirping like they too understood Filipino now. When the bride finally appeared, she was 15 minutes late. The groom, meanwhile, had arrived 45 minutes earlier, chatting with relatives and sipping a soda. Everyone smiled, no one seemed rushed, and the priest joked, "We'll start now, eventually." I laughed so hard I nearly cried. This was not disorganization. This was a performance art of patience, humor, and social grace. During the reception, the catering staff shouted, "Food now!" Guests wandered around, sampling drinks and hors d'oeuvres at their leisure. A few decided to take selfies, others danced spontaneously, and the buffet table remained untouched for almost 30 minutes. Now, in this context, became a breathing space, a deliberate pause between arrival and consumption, as if to savor anticipation itself. Government offices were my next adventure. Renewing my visa had taught me patience, but I wanted to see now in action at its bureaucratic peak. At the barangay hall, a notice on the wall read, "Lines now being served." I joined a queue of locals and expats, each waiting calmly while staff shuffled papers, signed forms, and exchanged jokes. I noticed an older man correcting a clerk's handwriting, and the clerk smiled, nodded, and kept working. No one complained. Now had stretched, bent, and folded, but chaos had not emerged. It had transformed into a harmonious rhythm, a communal patience with an invisible conductor orchestrating the flow. Family gatherings offered another hilarious take. Liza invited me to her Sunday lunch, which had been scheduled for now. I arrived on time to find that her entire extended family was still arriving. Nephews were being chased by a dog, aunts were chatting on the porch, and the matriarch was slowly stirring a pot of sinigang. "Come in now," she said with a grin, and I realized that now here included the dynamic, unpredictable arrival of everyone in the household. Food, conversation, and laughter would only begin when the cosmic order deemed it so. Even festivals were governed by now. I attended a local fiesta celebrating the town's patron saint. The program said, "Procession begins now." I found the streets surprisingly empty. Performers were adjusting costumes, the marching band was warming up, and the priest was still preparing his sermon. I waited, amused, and observed children running in puddles from last night's rain. Half an hour later, the parade began, not with precision, but with joy, laughter, and the occasional stray car honking. Now had expanded into a festival of flexibility. Transportation remained my daily comedy show. Jeepneys, tricycles, and buses operated under a philosophy of now that defied clocks. I hailed a jeepney one rainy afternoon. The driver shouted, "Board now!" I squeezed in, assuming we'd leave immediately. Instead, we waited as passengers finished chatting. Someone bought snacks. and a child waved at passing cars. We traveled slowly, stopping frequently to pick up friends, family, and occasional animals. Now was not just a guideline, it was a choreography of social life. Even in casual friendships, now took on a playful absurdity. I asked Liza to meet me at a cafe. She replied, "Now." I arrived at the appointed time and found her walking casually down the street, waving. She had stopped to chat with neighbors, buy snacks, and take selfies. Now was elastic, expanding to include whatever made the moment enjoyable. I had begun to realize that Filipino now wasn't laziness. It was generosity of time, a collective indulgence in humanity. At the wet market, I witnessed perhaps the purest example of now. Vendors shouted, haggled, and sold goods at their own pace. A woman selling fish yelled, "Fresh fish now," while finishing her conversation with a customer from 5 stalls away. Another vendor handed a chicken to someone while still counting pesos from the last sale. Now was chaotic, yet perfectly coordinated. Every transaction, every interaction had its own tempo, and everyone somehow understood it. Even technology seemed to bend to now. Text messages were often answered minutes, hours, or even days later, but no one stressed. A reply was received now when it was convenient, and no social bonds were broken. WhatsApp groups moved at their own pace. Facebook posts remained unacknowledged for hours, and yet friendships remained intact. I had learned that now was patience, humor, and understanding, wrapped into one deceptively simple word. By the end of my month-long immersion, I had transformed. My obsession with punctuality had melted away. My Western stress about schedules, deadlines, and efficiency had softened into laughter. I understood the Filipino now as a philosophy. Time was flexible, human interaction was sacred, and the small absurdities of life were meant to be enjoyed. I left the Philippines with memories, laughter, and a subtle recalibration of my internal clock. I realized that now was not about delay. It was about presence, community, and shared experience. In the Philippines, now is not a time. It's a living, breathing moment to savor, enjoy, and laugh through. Even back in my American city, I found myself smiling when someone said, "I'll be there now." I knew exactly what they meant, and I laughed, remembering the streets, the jeepneys, the fiestas, and the unshakable, joyful patience of a culture that had mastered the art of living fully in the moment. Filipino now had become my secret weapon. It had taught me that life's rhythm wasn't dictated by watches or calendars, but by laughter, connection, and shared human absurdity. And every time I texted a friend back home, I wrote, "I'll be there now," knowing that somewhere in that tiny word, there was a universe of meaning, stretching far beyond my American comprehension, yet perfect in its chaotic, joyful way.